And welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is curiosity as an antidote to judgment. So it's easy to get really judgy of ourselves, of others. And instead, if we can step into curiosity, we can open new worlds of perception, connection, and understanding. So that's today's topic. And before we get started, let's take a minute or two. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. I'm eager to hear what your eclipse experience was like. I imagine it was profoundly moving. So maybe you'll share that with us. But before we get started today, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the pressure, the temperature, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So curiosity is a special kind of magic. When we get curious, all kinds of doors open. We experience the ability to go beyond our habituated patterns of thought and behavior. When we get curious rather than, well, we can't be curious and judgmental all at the same time. So we often can find ourselves in loops of self-judgment where we see ourselves responding to something in a particular way, and then maybe we beat ourselves up about that and uh, provide ourselves with all kinds of negative messaging and essentially judge ourselves into a loop, a self-destructive loop. Instead, if we were to get curious about our behaviors, like, wow, where did that come from? Wow, what's going on here? What is this? What can I learn about it? What provoked it? What precipitated it, et cetera, et cetera? What would I need to believe to behave in that way, for example? So these curiosities allow us to move into new ways of thinking. And that's one of the things that I think is an important superpower to access, to move ourselves into new potentials. And curiosity is just probably like kryptonite for judgment, in the best of ways, where we can in being curious, in exploring something further, we can be cultivating space for connection that may not have otherwise had any kind of potential for existing. So not only can we apply this magic of curiosity to the judgment we might be imposing on ourselves, but potentially the judgment we might be imposing on others. And in these fractious times, to find ways to build bridges and create authentic connection and communion, understanding, cooperation is something that we desperately, desperately need. And curiosity can be the foundation of whatever bridges we would like to build. You know, to say, here's somebody, for example, who has very different beliefs from my own. What's going on there? What is behind that? How are they looking at the world in ways that are different from the way that I do? And what can I learn about that? What insights can I gain around that, rather than judging it, judging another's experience or perspective. When we judge, we are making an assumption, even when we're judging ourselves, right? We are holding a standard that may or may not be it may or may not be a realistic standard. It may or may not be a valid standard. It may not be an informed standard. Particularly now I've bounced back to looking at self-judgment, where we hold a standard for ourselves to live into. And when we don't live into that standard, for example, that is often a cause for self-judgment. And the question is, what does that judgment accomplish? So yesterday I was having a conversation where someone was talking about how they looked in the mirror and they just were judging themselves up one side and down the other. And I mentioned that perhaps they might be being harsh with themselves. And what if they were to be embracing what they see, accepting what they see, be curious about what they see? And they said, well, then they wouldn't have motivation to change it. And it's interesting to notice how so many of us believe that we need negative motivation in order to perform, in order to be motivated to accomplish anything. But what about positive motivation? Like to say, oh, I know I feel better when I work out, or I feel better when I'm carrying less weight on my body, rather than judging ourselves for being critical, being mean to ourselves, being negative toward ourselves. We could be encouraging toward ourselves instead. So we could be saying, hey, let's go do this because it feels better, rather than providing ourselves with all kinds of negative messaging, which is sort of conditioned, I think, to a great degree culturally, where we're motivated by being less bad rather than being good or happy. We're motivated by making ourselves, ideally trying to make ourselves less miserable rather than making ourselves happy, or moving toward things that are pleasant instead of moving away from things that are painful. And so that's an interesting thing to look at, is how do we motivate ourselves? And curiosity is a motivator, because it calls us forward. It calls us forward into discovery. And it can be a renewal of, or at least a hearkening back to our childlike wonder and sense of wanting to discover and understand the world and explore. There's so much to explore. When we make judgments, we come from a sort of a place of superiority, believing that we know better, or that our way is the right way, or whatever the judgment thought is the right way or a better way. And we're reinforcing a separation when we're judging. Even when we're judging ourselves, we're separating ourselves from ourselves. And when we become curious, then there's a movement toward connection, toward communion and understanding. So when we're curious, we're kind of setting aside our pre-conceptualization, our notions that we understand fully. We're sort of suspending our knowing in order to discover, to find something new. And when we do that, when we engage in curiosity and wonder, we have a richer experience of life, a more joyful experience of life, a more expansive experience. Because yes, we're kind of diving into the unknown, but rather than from a place of fearfulness, which is often how many of us encounter the unknown, instead of the fearfulness, we're diving into the unknown with an energy and maybe even a playfulness to discover something that we don't yet know. So rather than having the unknown thrust upon us and feeling overwhelmed by it, we're actually embracing the unknown. We're stepping into the unknown willfully, or with intention for discovery. And true curiosity is not driven by trying to prove your position. True curiosity is driven by ideally by a lack of bias, by a lack of preconception, but just open curiosity. And there is magic in that, because we're opening the door to new perception. And there's an element of fun about that rekindles the curiosity of a child observing nature, for example. You know, watching bugs, watching worms in the ground, or just new worlds presenting themselves for our observation and our engagement. And when that occurs, there's a shift of being, really, that comes about from the space of curiosity, because it's an openness, versus the state of judgment, which is closed. Judgment is very, very narrowly and rigidly defined. When we pass judgment on something else, even on our own behavior, even within ourselves, we are creating this separation between the judge and the judged. And ultimately, that separation, it is defined by the fact that it is a rift. And healing those rifts, finding communion, finding wholeness when we create those rifts, presents a big challenge. And there is merit to wholeness, that when we can find acceptance of what is, there's sort of there's a shift of being. When we can allow things to be as they are, there's a wholeness, and then we have an opportunity to move in an appropriate fashion in response rather than reaction to what is. So if we can get curious, for instance, about our own behavior, it can open us to a deeper understanding of our own dynamics. And when we have a deeper understanding of those dynamics, oftentimes the understanding itself is an opening to dissipating those patterns when we can recognize them. The awareness itself is a catalyst to change. At least it begins to open a door to choice. And when we talk about wholeness, we're talking about presence. And from the place of presence, we have the opportunity to exercise choice rather than reactivity. And when we exercise choice, we are exercising our sovereignty. We're not being automatons that are conditioned into particular reactions and behaviors that control us rather than emanate from a place of aliveness and engagement and presence with life. So curiosity is a way that we can kind of jump past so many of the rifts that we may have created in ourselves to step into greater relationship with ourselves, with each other, with nature, with the world. And that shift of being that comes about with curiosity is of a higher frequency, certainly, than judgment. I think this question of frequency and energy is such an interesting one, because conventionally talking about that stuff is kind of woo-woo, right? But we all experience this shift of energy that we're talking about. And if we can get curious about it, if we can investigate it, if we can observe it more readily, if we can give ourselves access to the experience of energetic shifts, in my experience, it becomes more and more obvious. It becomes more and more palpable to be able to recognize how these shifts of energy occur within us. You know, just feel into, what does it feel like when you're judgmental? It's like, it's bracing, it's kind of rigid, it's separate. When we feel into curiosity, there's an openness that we experience, and the energy of that, the experience of that is quite different, and it's expansive. And in these times when there's so many things that we interpret as threats, if we can find a way, instead of shutting down and bracing against these threats and against others ideas, et cetera, and against aspects of ourselves even, if we can find a way to open ourselves to a deeper understanding, to catalyze that connection, that deepening, then we're way ahead of the game. And it actually can manage to alleviate the tensions and the fears. There's just the inherent playfulness of curiosity can diffuse so much angst. And as any angst that we can diffuse is a good thing, right? If we can lighten the atmosphere, then it's a good thing to be able to shift our being. We shift the being of those around us. So we impact those around us by the way that we be. And any lightness that we can bring is a welcome addition. So curiosity, Curiosity with playfulness, not like earnest, serious curiosity, but curiosity with playfulness, like real, what is this? What is this? With the sense of wonder, can create all kinds of magic. So that's the invitation, is step into being curious about yourself, about the world, about our relationships, and see where that can take us. And that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is The Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network and Facebook page at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to please like and follow the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel, my YouTube channel. The links are in the description. And as always, it is such a privilege and pleasure to have the opportunity to commune with you and explore what it is together to be human. So until next time, so much love to you.